Hey everybody, so today we're going to make a video that's going to talk about a few different subjects. It's going to really be about traditionalism, charismaticism, and some other types of spiritual gifts. We're really going to be looking at three different subjects today, and it's very important that we realize it's really important for the unity of the church and for the sanity of our minds and our capacity to trust in God in this modern time in the church to understand the principles that I think can be laid out in this video. So when you look at the modern church, I want us to focus in on the segment of the church that is known as the Charismatic church. And so some people in the traditional church believe that the modern gifts of tongues and healing and prophecy as practiced in the Charismatic church are not the gifts that are in the book of Acts and it found the lives of the saints and the tradition. So other people believe that they are. Other people believe that they're not. The Eastern Orthodox and the Apostolic tradition also agree that they say that this is not the original type of gifts from Pentecost. There's also sometimes when people do things like hypnosis or things like disciplines like that, sometimes they can seem to have some gifts too. This could be in a creepy way sometimes, I think. But there might even be some type of natural gifts that we might even have. That might even be, like Father Ripperger, I believe, talks about this in the Science of Mental Health book, that because of our original nature has a lot more, before the fall has some abilities that we might not even think that we have, there might be some leftovers. So we might have some natural abilities to kind of maybe know about other people. So St. Padre Pio could be up here in the tradition and be able to read souls, whereas people in the charismatic movement might get the thing called words of knowledge. They might know something about somebody, whereas, maybe just by trying, you might know something about someone just by hanging around them. Who knows? And of course, you could do this through not so good means. You could get some help from the other side. That's not good. So here's the thing. There are these different levels, and it's deeply important to understand that these different levels of things, because one thing that should make us deeply nervous in the church, it's really my burden to try to, I'm very nervous to try to share this with you, get this out in the right way, because it's very important to understand this, because once you understand this, you can have peace and integrate all the good that is in every level and jettison the bad. So for example, somebody like, you might see someone like Benny Hinn, for example, where his method of praying for people in a charismatic way is very hypnotic. If you're familiar with hypnotic phenomena, even if you're familiar with the phenomena of no-contact martial arts, you'll see a lot of these resonances with the way that Benny Hinn kind of seems to almost hypnotize the people on stage. But I'm not going to say that what he's doing is false. I'm going to say what he's doing is of a lower level. It becomes false when you think you have the gift of the apostles. It becomes false when you think that you have a very high-level gift, when you have a very natural gift mixed with some devotional elements. It's not wrong to pray in a semi-hypnotic manner as long as you know what you're doing, and don't use it to puff yourself up. As long as you use it with humility and love for God, everything's okay. So here's the thing. And people can be healed in that context. It can happen. The similar thing, like a mid-level thing, but maybe you have like the Benny Hinn stuff is over here. A mid-level thing is like you'd have something like the charismatic movement, that's like the mainstream charismatic movement type of stuff, where you have folks, getting prophecies, words of knowledge, all these kind of things. I actually agree with the Orthodox and the Traditionalists that this is not exactly what goes on at Pentecost. This is not exactly what we see in the lives of the saints. But think about this. The charismatic movement, almost everyone can speak in tongues. Why is this? Because just like not everybody can receive the infused gift of contemplation, that people can have acquired contemplation, I believe that the charismatic movement has tried, because they've been divorced from apostolic tradition in the Pentecostal movement, which is Protestant, they've tried to seek after something they didn't really have access to. So they uncovered an ability that most people wouldn't have uncovered had they been plugged into the tradition. It doesn't mean that this is an evil ability in and of itself, as long as it doesn't delude us into thinking it's a very high-level ability. So the thing is, what they've discovered is a way of really expanding what we could do on a more normal level. They've developed new strengths in the absence of the strength of tradition. And these strengths can be redeemed. It's almost like what happens to a blind person. When the blind person loses their sight, they sharpen their hearing, and this is the same type of thing that's happened. Is that there's been these natural abilities have been supercharged, so to speak, in devotional ways in in this movement. So what we want to understand is that we can use these things as long as we understand them, and they can become ways of enriching our life and our faith. If we can, and this is a way of reconciling the charismatic and traditional factions, because it's true that the charismatic stuff is good if you understand it rightly. It's true it's true what the traditionalists are saying if you understand it rightly. What the traditionalists are saying is that this is not what the apostles did, but this doesn't mean it's evil. This doesn't mean it can't become an extension of what the apostles did. This doesn't mean that we can't redeem it. If Saint Thomas can redeem what was said by the pagan philosopher Aristotle, how much more so can we redeem what is said by Protestant Christians? It doesn't make sense to be able to redeem what's said by pagans and not be able to redeem what's being said by Protestants. The thing is that we just have to make sure that what's being reworked according to real principles of Catholic theology. And what's deeply helpful is to realize that sometimes you have very natural gifts. Like, so for example, if we wanted to think about somebody, let's talk about energy healing for a moment, because there's ways in which I made other videos about this. There's too much to say about this in one thing, because this is something that's deeply used by demonic delusions. So the thing is, there's a demonic delusion that there's energy in the body and these type of things, but it doesn't mean that there aren't senses in which you could feel something that's like energy. But the demons exploit this to make you think you have powers. So if somebody like Father Narciso Irala writes about this in his book, and he talks about how you could concentrate different parts of your body and feel like a tingling. But that's obviously just understanding concentration. It doesn't mean there's energy in that part of the body. But these senses can be exploited by the demonic. It doesn't mean that I can't feel the inside of my hand and ask God to fill my hand with love too. But that doesn't mean it's a spiritual gift. It means I have to know what's happening when I'm using something. So that's very low level. That's a very low level gift. The next level up is the ones that are in the charismatic Pentecostal movement. Then the next level up is things like, okay, these are like the real things that are given, like reading of souls, like the Padre Pio, really speaking other languages. It doesn't mean that a person can't kind of acquire these gifts. And that's the thing, is that there's different levels of like skills, practices, gifts or something. There's levels of these things and types of these things. And the fact that these things have been developed in these other movements means that there are ways that we can actually extend tradition and redeem these things and free them up from their delusions so that they can become life-giving practices. Almost like you have this keg of living water and you kind of plug different spigots into it at different levels. And it's realizing that, yes, you're drawing water from here, from this method, drawing water from this type of method here, but you're still drawing the water, but you're putting this machinery into the thing so that it all is operating in a coherent way. It's almost like we take the strengths of these other groups, but we take them, but we put them out of the humility of tradition. We humble these strengths by showing them tradition, and then they become even stronger, and then the strengths all get added to strengths, and then it becomes that the Catholic Church expands, and the capacities of our personalities expand, and we learn how to integrate practices at every level of our being and enhance the thing. Because and the reason why this is so important is because this is happening in the church. There are people who have been traditionalists, then they become charismatic, they left the church, they got all these gifts, they don't know what to do with it. This is not just an intellectual exercise, this is a life and death struggle for souls. This is happening in the church. This is the mystical passion, I believe, of the church. This is what Christ is doing in the modern world, reconciling all things to himself. And we can't afford, I believe, to step away from the reconciling work of Christ, to bring all things into himself, to bring a deep wholeness to our personalities, to make us resemble Mary, because these things, when we take them into ourselves, they strengthen us, and they strengthen our nature as well as with grace, and make us better able to bear the light of grace and help us to be stronger. And this is it helps us to be like Mary, like the Immaculate Conception, strong in our nature, sensitive to all things, and it helps us to grow. So this is what I wanted to share with you today. I wanted you guys to understand this and to really be able to integrate this in a good way. And so I want you to really think about the things in this video and to really begin to think about how we can reconcile all these things. And I use this charismatic movement thing as a framework, but everything can be reconciled. You just have to understand what type of gift you're using, what level it's at. We can agree with the traditionalists. We can agree with the charismatics. We can agree. We can even like what Benny Hinn's doing. We can even redeem things like from the energy healing stuff that's even lower types of practices and gifts. We can do this. We have to understand exactly what's happening. Precision is the key to ending diabolic disorientation, to breaking reconciliation. This is what we need to know. We need to understand this. We need to understand how to harmonize all these things with each other. So it is true. And the church affirms the charismatic movement, while the tradition is kind of against it. But that's how we can make sense of all these disparate things. That's how I can agree with the Orthodox that you can fall into delusion. You can fall into delusion through the Pentecostalism because you say, okay, I feel really close to God. I obviously have gifts. I have all these things. Well, really, you have more of a practice than a gift, probably. You might get an infused gift of a tongue, but it doesn't mean you can't practice tongues. So it's really understanding these levels of these gifts so that there isn't going to be any problem with these kinds of things. That they don't lead to spiritual delusion, and instead they lead to spiritual nourishment. So that's what I want to really understand. Yes, I agree with the traditionalists. Yes, I agree in a way with the charismatics. The traditionalists have to be open to the redemption of the charismatics. The charismatics have to realize they're not exactly in line with tradition. It's like that's really what has to happen so that these things can be reconciled as new practices that expand the territory of tradition, that really find where they are in reality, that don't lead to delusion and puffing ourselves up. That's what really has to happen. And it has to all be about loving God, it has to be about humility. These are all important things, contrition, humility, loving other people, that comes before the gifts. So I hope that this is helpful to try to make sense of the mess of this subject. The only reason why I was able to come up with this is by pouring out my heart and my sufferings about this thing to God this morning. And I just wanted to share that with you because I believe that God wants to reconcile all things to himself, including the charismatic movement and the traditional movement.